Hello everyone, this is Ujjwal Gandhi from Spatial Thoughts. Today I want to talk to you about GeoLibre. This is a new open source project created by Dr. Qisheng Wu. This is a web-based GIS that runs in your browser, and you can access it just by visiting a web page. You can optionally install it on your machine if you wanted to, but just a static website that uses your web browser as the engine. It runs locally. The data stays on your computer. You can load data from the cloud sources if you want to, but all the analysis runs on your computer and the data stays private on you. While it started out as a viewer for geospatial data, it has quickly become a powerhouse of features. It now offers features that rival large desktop GIS like QGIS, and offering even more functionality that doesn't exist in the open source ecosystem. So today I want to show you how it works. We'll try to replicate a workflow that I teach in my QGIS class, and we'll create a story map that we can publish on the web as an interactive map. So whenever you want to use GeoLibre, you just visit this URL, it loads in your browser, and you are good to go. You can start with a new project. When you start a new project, you can choose from a variety of base map. It comes with this really nice globe view with a default base map, but you can load a variety of base maps from the web. Let's load a nice satellite imagery base map. We can go to plugins, and from the base map, activate the base map plugin. I want to search for the base map called Blue Marble from NASA. This is just a nice base map for the world, which has been created from the Landsat imagery. Next step, we want to add some data. GeoLibre can load all sorts of geospatial data formats, either from your computer or from the internet in any of the cloud optimized data formats. You can see it can load all sorts of layers, including 3D layers and point clouds. For today, we want to load this dataset. This is the dataset of the piracy incidents across the oceans. NGA collects and curates this database of maritime piracy, which we can just download as a shapefile. And this is a large database of points indicating where pirate attacks have occurred. I've downloaded the shapefile. Let's load it to GeoLibre. I'm going to go to vector layer. You can just browse and load data from your file system. I'm going to load and select the shapefile called ASM events. This stands for anti-shipping activity messages, which is just a fancy name of pirate attacks. Let's select all the shapefile with all the sidecar files and open it. And GeoLibre, as you see here, GeoLibre uses the DuckDB database engine to read and process vector data. It is using the version of DuckDB that has been converted to JavaScript using a technology called WebAssembly, and that JavaScript version of DuckDB is packaged with GeoLibre. So whenever you visit this web page, a JavaScript package containing DuckDB along with many open source tools gets loaded into your browser, and that's what is used to do all the loading and analysis. You can see we have the database loaded here. You can open the attribute table just like you would do in a GIS. You can see it's got a lot of different fields along with the descriptions. You can also go and pick any of the points and learn more about the piracy incidents that happened here. What we want to do is we just want to analyze and find out the hotspots of piracy incidents. This is an example I teach in my advanced QGIS class, but we'll see how we can do this completely in a browser without installing any software. First, let's style this data a little bit better. I'm going to change the fill color to be maybe a little bit orange. We'll change the radius here, and I'm going to just remove the stroke. So this is what our piracy incidents looks like. You can adjust the color slightly if you wanted to. Yeah, I like this one. So now you can see we have this piracy incidents that are spread across the world. It's not obvious where the hotspots are. We can use a technique called billing, where we overlay a grid and then count number of points that fall within each grid. Now, this typically involves using a desktop GIS, but GeoLibre comes with a whole bunch of processing tools. And this is the part that I still can't wrap my head around. There are a whole bunch of processing tools, including the ones from white box tools, all converted to JavaScript using WebAssembly and packaged right into this browser. So you can just access any of them and run your analysis in the browser. It uses your CPU and data that resides on your computer, but it uses the browser to run the analysis. Let's do this analysis. I want to go and find this tool. There's a tool called bin points to H3. H3 is an hexagonal gridding system. It's a standard grid where it ranges from level 0 to 15. The higher the level, the smaller the grids become. So this tool just creates this grid and then counts the number of points that fall into each grid. We can just run this tool. You can see it opens up this processing interface. We can select the layer, what we want to do it. We want to just count them and the resolution of the grid. I'm going to use the grid 3 since we're working with a large global data set and we want to have a larger grids. But you can adjust this to whatever grid level you want. And I'm going to run this. And this is going to take the data that I have, use the bundled software packages to do the analysis, and then load the results into GeoLibre. So you can see now I have the grid here. So this is the hexagon grid that was created. If I go and inspect any of the grid, it'll tell me how many piracy incidents were in this. And if I just turn on my layer, I can kind of verify that it did the right thing. So just this analysis run in the browser. I have this hexagon bins with the grid count. Let's visualize this so we can figure out where are the hotspots. We can go and visualize them as 3D. So we can just say, because GeoLibre is a 3D viewer, you can see it's a globe. We can just view this as 3D since now we have the counts. I'm going to just say use 3D extrusion and use the count as the property. And we'll just increase the scale a bit so we can see this in 3D. I'm going to increase it maybe even more so we can see this thing in 3D. So you can see now I see those spikes. I can use my right mouse button to hold and tilt the view. So now I'm able to see this regions where there are high number of piracy incidents. I want to change the symbology so we can visualize this a little better. I'm going to change this to graduated symbology, and we can use this different color ramps here. I'm going to keep this one. Since most of the grids have very low counts, I'm just going to keep this as pretty low numbers. Let's do this and see how it looks. Yeah, this looks better. At least I can see the grids which are having more counts in brighter color. And now I can explore this map and see where there are hotspots of piracy. So Gulf of Aden, near Horn of Africa. But most of the hotspots are in Bay of Bengal and in Southeast Asia. And this is an insight that we were able to generate very quickly using this web-based tool without installing any software, and able to visualize this nicely on a globe. While this is an impressive functionality for an open source project that's barely a few months old at this point, but what's even more impressive is the kind of feature it offers, which doesn't exist elsewhere in the open source ecosystem. One of the features I always wanted is to be able to tell stories with the data. Can we create videos? Can we create the story maps that tell the story of our map? All of the tools required some coding and building something that's custom, but I was happy to see that in just the last few days, the story map feature got added to GeoLibre. So now you can create these stories that can be authored just from this web viewer and then published as a standalone HTML pages. So let's go and create a story from this dataset to tell the story of the piracy hotspots in the world. So to create a story map, we go to project and story map and enter a title. I'm just going to enter maritime piracy, and maybe you can enter your name. Here you can start creating chapters. Each chapter will be a view of the map that shows certain layers, and then the next chapter will zoom to a different region. You can turn and off and on the layers and then add a pop-up box with some information. Let's add a chapter. The chapter 1, I'm going to just tell the story of modern piracy, and we can add a description. Let me copy paste some text. This allows you to write some HTML. So I have added a link to Wikipedia. You can also add some images that show up here. And we can say what layer should be visible. So at the beginning, we should just say only keep the base map on. The other layers should be turned off. So I'm going to turn off this layer along with the H3 pins, right? So this both should be turned on. Let's preview this. So if I present this, you can see this is what the story looks like. There is this chapter navigation from here, and you see our image and the description that we added. We can also set a view. I'm just going to set the view from here, saying that I want, when the story starts, I want to be zoomed in to this part of the world. So now if I present this, you will see that the map starts with this. Let's add the next chapter. In the next chapter, I want to tell about the piracy data that we got from NGA. So let's add the information about that. This chapter talks about this anti-shipping activity messages, and I'm going to copy paste some description here. When we move to this frame, we want to make sure we hide the H3 bins layer, but we turn on the ASM events, right? So this should be turned on. So in our second chapter, we've added the description, and we want to make sure we still keep the gridded H3 bins layer off, but we want to show the piracy incidents here. And we've added the on exit effect, where when we leave this, we should turn on the H3 bins. Let's see what the map looks like at this moment. So map starts like this. And as we put the second chapter, we can see the piracy incidents get turned on, and we see the information about this. We can adjust the view as well if we wanted to using this button. I want to add the final chapter to the story. And in this story, we're going to talk about the heat map that we created. So we'll just say this is the chapter title. And let's paste the description here. And at this point, we know that the heat map is on. We can also turn off the ASM events here. We don't need those points anymore. And I want to make sure we see the location of the heat map. So we're going to fly and tilt our view. I'm going to use my right mouse button to tilt the view to show this view of the heat maps here. Let's preview the story. So we start from the global view, zoom in to the region showing the individual incidents. And then finally, when we show the heat map, we show this map. So this is pretty cool, pretty easy to author and show the view. Now this tells a story. You can just scroll through this. So when we publish this, we'll just have this as a web page. People can just read this and scroll through this, and then the map gets driven through the chapters. They don't have to zoom in or do anything with them. So when we're done, we can go and say, let's save the story. We can export this as an HTML file. If you want to take a look at the final exported map, I have added the link in the video description. There are a whole bunch of more features, and the platform is being developed very actively. If you run into issues or if you have feedback, do head over to the GitHub repository and file an issue or start a discussion on the features that you'd like to see. Before we end, I want to give a shout out to Dr. Qisheng Wu, who's been tirelessly building this and has single-handedly built the whole GeoLibre system. Thank you, and see you in the next video.